Some toy trends make sense, like the eternal fascination with Lego or even Barbie-mania. The fad for trolls, however, doesn't immediately make sense. These strange plastic figures with staring eyes and wild hair don't really do much, but that hasn't stopped people wanting them. This month on Fabulous Folklore is going to be all about children's folklore, and that led me on to thinking about toys. So while the folklore of toys might have seemed more obvious, troll dolls give us the chance to explore toys related to folklore. So let's explore where troll dolls came from and how trolls themselves appear in Scandinavian myth and folklore in this week's episode of Fabulous Folklore. Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host, Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Well, hello there, and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. I do hope that you enjoyed last month, which was the Newcastle case study in looking at how folklore can and does show up in local history. And a couple of people have gotten in touch to say how much they enjoyed them and could kind of sense my passion for my hometown. So if it has made you want to visit Newcastle, excellent. I have done my job. And please do let me know if you are going to be in the area at any point, and I will take you to see the Vampire Rabbit because I'm apparently his PR agent now. But anyway, that's a side issue. So I hope you enjoyed those. This month is going to be much more classic in terms of types of folklore. And a little while ago, I put a survey out asking people for either children's folklore they remembered, so like beliefs that they remembered or games they invented and things like that, but also what had they observed in their own children. And while I'm still busy parsing through some of the absolutely outstanding responses that I got to that form, honestly, I've had a really good laugh reading through them. You lot were really inventive as kids, is all I'm going to say. But I thought I'll put an episode in at the beginning to give me time to do that. So I was looking at toys, because I thought, well, children, then natural word association, toys. And I thought, I know, I'll have a look at trolls, because I'm going to have someone on later on in the month to talk to us about dolls more widely. And I thought, oh yeah, trolls, they were a massive thing when I was younger. And while all of this month is dedicated to children everywhere and their happiness and safety, because obviously children don't always get the safety and nurturing environment that they should get, so therefore this kind of month is for them. But this particular episode is actually dedicated to the lovely Mara Starling, who has been on as a guest before, who has an absolutely immense collection of troll figures, and they are amazing. So I hope Mara doesn't mind me dedicating this episode to her purely because of the size of the collection that she's got. She's got some absolutely fabulous ones. So anyway, who invented trolls? Because that is the thing. Obviously, someone had to come up with this as an idea, right? So we actually have to go back to basically the 1950s. And there was a Danish baker called Thomas Dahm who invented the first troll doll. And originally, they were actually known as good luck trolls. And unfortunately, Dahm had fallen on hard times when the local flour factory closed. And he was earning a somewhat meagre living shoveling snow. So whenever he got home, he would carve figures from wood for his children. And his wife then suggested that he try selling them, so he took them along to Aalborg, the nearest town, and he actually managed to come back empty-handed because he'd sold all of the figures on that first trip. He continued doing this for a while, obviously massively much preferred making figures rather than shoveling snow, because you would, wouldn't you? And people started asking, oh, can you come to my house first? They wanted first dibs on the figures he was creating. And before long, fans of the figures were commissioning much bigger projects, and he found himself working as a sculptor. One project involved a Santa Claus sculpture, and he then added tiny Christmas elves to the design to help draw attention to the giant Santa Claus. And people loved these little elves so much that they actually then asked where they could buy their own, and those were the elves that bore quite a strong resemblance to the troll figures that we now see today. As you can imagine, carving them from wood probably took quite a lot of time, so Dahm switched to rubber bodies to save time, and then in 1961 he switched to rotational moulding using PVC plastic, and that's essentially how a lot of plastic toys are still made even now. By 1962 they were a global phenomenon, and ads would encourage children to rub the doll's hair for good luck, but as Dahm explained, their ugliness meant you couldn't help but laugh at them. And it was laughing that brought you good luck, which is an interesting sort of switch on where this luck comes from. But even the origin story became a matter of folklore, because according to the Coventry Standard in 1966, they said that a Scandinavian fisherman made the first dolls to pass the time while sick, which is completely different from the origin story that they're given elsewhere. And the same newspaper also referred to the trolls of folklore as mischievous dwarfs, which clearly also incorrect on so many levels, as we will see, because we are going to have a look at trolls in folklore later on. But in terms of the troll figures that you could buy in the shops, in December 1965, the Northern Daily Mail predicted that the toy of choice that Christmas would be trolls. The newspaper described them as, and I quote, grotesque creatures with wild flowing hair, end quote, while describing how babies could safely throw them out of their crib, and I quote, without spoiling their looks, for there are no looks to spoil, end quote. The article went on to discuss other types of doll, including self-locking bricks, but it's fascinating that they led with the troll doll out of all of the other toys that they featured in that article. But trolls weren't just restricted to children either, and in 1963, President John F. Kennedy welcomed Betty Miller to the White House following her solo trans-Pacific flight, which was a world first, and she brought her troll, Dammit, who had been her good luck charm during the flight, and yes, JFK greeted Dammit as well. And I love the photo of that you can find online, and it's brilliant that she just took the troll along and that JFK kind of went along with it, so I thought that was quite funny. In May 1965, the Belfast Newsletter reported on a 19-year-old hairstylist who was taking part in the National Junior Hairstylist Competition. There, in the middle of the article about her performance so far, was a paragraph about her troll doll, Tubby. The newspaper described Tubby as Marie-Law's lucky mascot, and she basically said that she wouldn't go anywhere without him because he brought her luck. As it happens, my uncle actually had a black-haired troll called Dan that he hung from the neck of his guitar while his band gigged around the working men's clubs of the Northeast. So it's quite fascinating how this became a thing for adults to engage with as well. Naturally, Dam's success spawned imitators, and there are various issues around the fact that the design sort of ended up in public domain when they probably shouldn't have done. And a range of companies then launched their own trolls, and perhaps the most popular were the Rush trolls, named for founder Russ Berry. His company was worth $200,000 in 1988, but then $150 million in 1992. Trolls, it seemed, made good business sense, and children cared little for the branding as long as they could get their hands on trolls. There is another line as well where they actually put like a plastic gem stud in them, and that was what you rubbed for luck. So they were still trying to get that idea of these being good luck charms in there somehow, but obviously they had to do it in a slightly different way. But then there was a comeback. So in 1983, the Norfin troll line launched, and they were actually officially licensed by Dom, and they offered new facial expressions and a range of clothing. And the intent behind these figures was to encourage people to collect them because they were all so different. And by the early 1990s, the somewhat inexplicable comeback was heavily underway, and that's when I got my own troll dressed as a clown that I named Esmeralda. She's the figure that's currently illustrating the video on YouTube, and you'll also see her if you look at the blog post for this episode as well. I normally hate clowns, just to make that clear. I really don't like them at all, but something about Esmeralda is just really, really cute. So I don't remember how I ended up with a troll doll, I'll be completely honest, but she does guard one of my bookshelves even now. And if you're curious, it's the one with all my film studies books on. I think it's just because that's where there's the most space, but there we go. What was quite interesting though was that the Northampton Mercury even labelled the import of the dolls as an invasion in time for Christmas in September 1992. Sadly, Dom died in 1989, so he hadn't actually seen the new wave of interest in the trolls. The trolls do also periodically pop up in the newspapers, and I just thought I would share a couple of examples with you. So in July 1992, a 6-year-old girl offered a reward of £3 for the return of her doll after she left it in a bank in Princess Risborough, in Buckinghamshire. Now, thankfully, a kind-hearted shop owner gave her a replacement, even finding a bride troll for her, since her lost doll wore a bridal dress made by her grandmother. And I thought it's a shame that she didn't get the dress back, or indeed the original troll back, but I just wanted to include that for the kind-hearted shop owner who was like, oh no, this poor child has raided her piggy bank for a reward for her troll back, I'll just give her one. So I just thought that was quite nice for A, the girl being so desperate for her doll back that she would offer a reward, but B, the shop owner just kind of getting involved and going, here you go. So it's quite funny when I was looking through British newspaper archives and I found the original story and I was like, oh no, a lost toy. And then I found the follow-up and I was like, oh, okay, there's a second part. Excellent. Meanwhile, in 1993, a man ended up in court for stealing £4,000 worth of trolls in Grimsby. And I was like, how many trolls even is that? I've no idea. It didn't actually say, it was just how much they were worth. And he did also steal wax jackets, telephones and answering machines. And that's just such a 1990s collection of things to steal. But the newspaper absolutely led with the theft of the trolls instead. Which again, I was like, okay, wow, that's quite an impressive haul. But 1994 legislation in America paved the way for Dom to actually regain control over their copyright, which was restored in 1996. And that reduced the tide of imitators, and Ruffs finally stopped selling trolls in 2004. They do sell other things instead, but just not trolls anymore. And then, of course, DreamWorks got the licensing rights to make the first Trolls film in 2013. So that's how all of that came about. But in case you are wondering, there is a Guinness Book of Records troll-related record, and that is Sherry Groom of Alliance, Ohio, at the time of recording, holds the record for the largest troll collection, because her collection contains 8,130 trolls, and you can actually go and visit it in Ohio. If anyone has been to see it, please do let me know on social media and send me a picture, because I've seen photos on the Guinness website, but yeah, I'd just quite like to see what it looks like, because it does look immense. But of course, that's basically where trolls and the fascination as toys comes from. And I thought what really fascinated me about it was the fact that so many adults were engaging with them in a way that you don't really necessarily get with things like Barbie. Although you do obviously get that with Lego, because Lego is literally for everyone. But then, of course, trolls have this additional interest to Fabulous Folklore, and I'm assuming you all, the fact that obviously trolls appear in folklore. So in Scandinavian myth, by comparison to these dolls, trolls are decidedly unpleasant characters. They live in the fringes, such as forests or under bridges, and they harass passers-by, kidnap women, and demand tolls of all different descriptions. And we can just look at the Norwegian story of Three Billy Goats Gruff, collected by Jørgen Moe and Peter Christensen as Bjørnson in the 1840s, which I did cover in the Goats in Folklore episode. So if you're watching on YouTube, there's a link to that somewhere at the top of the screen. In his book about trolls, which is fascinating, John Lindau describes how trolls appear in the Icelandic legendary sagas, usually in connection with magic and shapeshifting. He notes a difference between the earlier believable trolls, with these later ones being gigantic, fiercely strong, and capable of magic. Even humans can become troll-like with enough of the right attributes, with the Viking leader apparently being so huge and terrible to look at that he and his men are more like trolls than humans. And the fact that they're apparently immune to weapons, eat everything raw, and drink blood helps the comparison. Elsewhere, being a troll is levelled as a curse by an evil stepmother. In Grimur's saga Lodinkenna, or the saga of Grim Shaggycheek, which is set in 8th century Norway, Grimur Loðkenni is on the way to marry Lofthana, the beautiful daughter of a powerful ruler. He encounters an incredibly ugly female creature wearing a skin cloak, and this troll woman offers her help in exchange for a kiss from him. Grimur does so and goes to bed with her, and the following morning he finds Lofthana in bed beside him, and he learns that her stepmother had cursed her to become a troll. Since he overcame his revulsion at her troll appearance, he broke the spell. And this is quite a common motif that you find in a lot of folklore, that if someone can overcome their revulsion at how usually an old woman looks, they then end up with all these riches and what have you. So I think there's quite a valuable lesson in that one. Yet the feature of trolls with which we might be most familiar is their tendency to turn to stone if sunlight touches them. So in Iceland, the idea that trolls couldn't abide daylight lived on in a series of legends about specific rocks, and these, according to the stories, were once trolls until the sunlight caught them. Holy men and saints could also overcome trolls. So in one legend from the 1600s, recorded by Jens Lauritsen Wolf, St. Lawrence was in Sweden trying to speed up the construction of Lund Cathedral. A troll offered to finish it quickly, which is interesting, having a troll actually offering to help. But St. Lawrence had to address him by name as a form of payment. If he couldn't manage that, then he could pay the troll with the sun and the moon, or the troll would take his eyes as payment. Somewhat surprisingly, given these payment terms, St. Lawrence agreed, but the troll worked quickly, as promised, and finished the church. The troll clearly wanted payment, which I can't help feeling like I'm on the troll side at this point, because he has actually fulfilled his side of the contract, and St. Lawrence realised that he'd completely underestimated the troll's ability. While wandering in the countryside, pondering a solution, he lay down on a mound to rest, and he heard the troll's wife talking to his children, and she named the troll Find. So when the troll came by and demanded the payment that he was due, let's be honest, St. Lawrence repeated his name. Find the troll grew furious and threatened to destroy the church, but St. Lawrence forbade him in the name of the Lord. This apparently explains the presence of a pillar in the crypt that looks like a male figure is clutching it, and the nearby pillar features a female figure believed to be the troll's wife. Lindau notes that the mason may never have intended to actually carve trolls, the figures might not be related to one another, but they've become associated through this particular legend anyway. And of course, by comparison, in folk tradition, trolls show far more variety, being a range of sizes, sometimes they're ordinary, and sometimes they're even fair of face. Other trolls were ancient and actually helped to create the landscape, while others were driven away by the sound of church bells. And folklorist Bengt af Klintberg divided trolls and fairies into two groups, with trolls being found in mountains and hills, and fairies found in underground homes. So in that particular index, troll refers to a range of supernatural beings, and surprisingly there are actually legends in which trolls and humans coexist peacefully, and this is where they kind of act like good neighbours, where one can borrow something from the other and vice versa. And I actually really like the idea of that they're not unrelentingly terrible in all of these stories, which seems a little bit more realistic, because if there's a range of temperaments in humans, you would imagine the same in other beings as well. But these stories also feature methods for avoiding being taken by them. Because that's the other idea, the fact that you might say to someone as a curse, may the trolls take you, which I guess kind of leads on to films like Labyrinth, albeit with a different type of supernatural being. Other stories see trolls enforcing what they see as correct behaviour, so they might punish people who miss church, anyone who overworks their labourers, so feel free to punish away on that one as far as I'm concerned. They also punish people who fail to bless food or display greed. And again, you look at that list and go, I'm not entirely seeing a problem with that. But obviously there are yet more stories in which trolls kidnap people who are out late at night, often on mountains or in forests. And Lindau explains that these stories may have been used to explain sudden disappearances when people ventured into dangerous spaces. So if someone went into the forest and didn't come back, assuming they'd been kidnapped by trolls, would potentially explain that far better than potentially other explanations that may have happened. There was, of course, also at that point the hope, I guess, that they might come back. Some kidnappings actually occurred from people's homes, but if you knew where the trolls lived, you could ring church bells nearby, which would then prompt them to release the captive. So folklore preserves all of these different methods of essentially getting past the trolls' different behaviour and what have you, or indeed protecting yourself from the trolls in the first place. Unless I'm assuming you lived next to a nice one that was quite a good neighbour. Obviously, trolls have gone on to appear in other forms of culture as well, so we find them in the work of Tolkien, they're in the Discworld books, D&D, World of Warcraft, among others, so clearly something about them appeals to people. I don't have the space to go into them at this point, but do let me know if you want to hear more about supernatural creatures in popular culture, because that is definitely something that we can have a look at. But ultimately, how do the trolls of folklore relate to the toy trolls that we started this episode with? And in short, they don't, as far as I can see. Dom took inspiration from the stories of his youth when making his original figurines, which did create an initial link. But I feel like their popularity with the first customers was probably a combination of Dom's own inventiveness and people's desire to own what is popular. So like, look at Labubu's now. He did also make them quite cute. Like, I know people call them ugly, but because they are quite adorable in their own way, it does remove a lot of the sting from the original folklore. And I think there's also the additional aspect that making them good luck figures also sanitizes them slightly as well. Yet the stories of how attached people became to their trolls also shows how these figures did possess something of a magical quality of their own. So look at Marie, the young hairstylist, taking her troll to competitions for luck, or Betty Miller taking her troll on her trans-Pacific flight, again for luck. For a 6-year-old child to raid her piggy bank to put up a reward for the return of her beloved doll also says a lot about how much these trolls came to mean to people. So in this way, the folklore of troll dolls isn't a series of beliefs people hold about the figures individually, and it's not even really a set of practices associated with them. It's the simple way that people took the idea that they brought good luck and then just ran with it. And before you dismiss the idea as being silly, just ask yourself, do you wear lucky socks to help your team win a game? Or wear a specific item for job interviews? It's basically the same thing. People look for magical help, and in this particular case, they turn to plastic figures with wild hair. What I'd like to know is, did you have any trolls? How many of them did you have? I found some amazing photos online of ones where they'd actually been added underneath a bridge in Portland in Oregon, which I thought was quite interesting. I can't figure out why, but the photo of them is actually a little bit weird, but there we go. So did you have any? What did you call them? Do you still collect them now? I actually looked up mine on eBay, and the price for a clown like Esmeralda, because none of them are exactly the same as her. Obviously, they came in various colourways. They all sort of came with like different coloured hair or different coloured outfits, and the price seemed to range from like £9 to £26. And I can't help feeling like the person asking for 26 was possibly overestimating it slightly. But I am, as I say, interested. If you had any, please do feel free to let me know. Next week we will be moving on to looking at the responses that I got to my folklore questionnaire, and I've loosely divided the answers into monsters that people believed in or invented, urban legends which don't necessarily have to involve a monster, and also games that people played and invented. So they're the kind of things we're going to be having a look at over the next 3 weeks. So I hope you enjoy that as well. I completely forgot to mention in the previous episodes that my new book is out now. So if you are interested in love magic or love divination and how both of them appear specifically in folklore, then my new book, Bring Me Love, is out now, pretty much everywhere. And I have put a link to its page on my website, so that then leads you off to like Amazon and other platforms and so on as well. I'll put that in the show notes. So I've been doing various interviews for that. So I've already been on the lovely Dara Mason's Spirit Box talking about it. I'm also doing a talk at Newcastle Castle on the 20th of February at 6 p.m. about love magic. So if you are in Newcastle, please do come along. It'll be lovely to see you. And you will be able to buy physical copies of the book from me at that particular event, because I've actually been able to order some. So it'll be lovely to see you there. And obviously it is the month for all things love and romance. So as I say, if that is something that interests you, that book is available now. Otherwise, it's been lovely chatting to you. I hope that everybody's well. Again, wishing health, hope and happiness to all of you as ever. And I'll see you next week when we'll have a look at some of the urban legends that you lot came up with in your youth. So I hope you look forward to that, and I'll see you soon. Cheerio. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. I don't get paid per play of the podcast like musicians do, so if you'd like to support the podcast so I can keep it ad-free and help me pay for all the annoying stuff like web hosting and cover the hours it takes me to make these episodes, then you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi or become a member of the Fabulous Folklore family by becoming a paid supporter on Ko-fi, Patreon and Substack. Or you can leave a review, tell a friend, or share episodes on social media for free. It all helps.